The chandelier trembled when the laughter began. It wasn't loud at first, just a ripple of sound moving through crystal and champagne. But it spread like heat across the ballroom. Every guest felt it. Every camera turned toward the tall man at the center table, Lawrence Haldane, the billionaire with the perfect smile and the reputation for cruelty disguised as charm. He had just made a bet, $1 million, he said, voice calm as glass, that our young server here wouldn't dare ask me what the word dignity is worth. The laughter swelled. Silverware chimed. People looked away, pretending not to. It was supposed to be a joke, one of those cruel entertainments the rich mistake for wit. The waitress froze mid-step, a tray of glasses balanced on one hand. Her name tag read Mara. Her eyes met his for only a second. She didn't flinch. Around her the air thickened with expensive perfume and fear. Mara Dorsey had worked too many nights like this, rooms full of faces that didn't see her, hands that waved without thanks. She knew the script: smile, serve, disappear. But this time, something inside her went still instead of small. She studied the man who had turned her into a dare. Haldane's tuxedo fit like armor. His cufflinks gleamed with engraved initials. H.H., the symbol of ownership. Even his laughter sounded rehearsed. Someone at his table whispered, "She should play along, it's just a joke." Mara set the tray down carefully. Every sound in the room seemed to stop. Music, chatter, even the hum of the chandelier's bulbs. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her tone precise. "Did you say dignity has a price?" Gasps fluttered through the room. Cameras turned again, phones lifted. Haldane leaned back in his chair, amused. "Of course it does. Everything has a price. Even pride." The moment became a kind of theater. Donors smiled uneasily. A violinist in the corner lowered his bow. No one intervened. No one wanted to risk proximity to shame. Mara's heartbeat sounded loud in her own ears, but her posture never wavered. She remembered her mother's voice. "You can't let them tell you who you are, Mara. You tell them by standing still." So she stood still. "What would you like me to do?" she asked. Haldane's grin sharpened. "Simple. Ask me about dignity. See if I can define it better than you can live it." The cruelty wasn't in the words. It was in the tone, that effortless dismissal. He expected laughter again. He expected her to bow her head and move on. Instead, she tilted hers slightly, as if studying a specimen. "Then I accept," she said. The sentence dropped like a stone in water. No one moved. No one breathed. Haldane blinked. "Except what?" "The bet," Mara replied. $1 million that I will ask, and that you will answer." A slow murmur passed through the audience, disbelief mixed with admiration. The billionaire's smile faltered for half a second, then recovered. "You can't be serious," he said. Her eyes did not leave his. Completely. In that instant, the atmosphere of the ballroom changed. The glitter, the music, the staged smiles all seemed to fade. What remained was a single line of tension stretched between wealth and worth, arrogance and calm. Mara picked up her tray again, balanced it effortlessly, and turned away. The sound of her footsteps echoed across the marble floor, steady, deliberate, unafraid. Behind her, Haldane's laughter returned, louder this time, but the mirth was brittle. Cameras caught his face, the forced amusement, the glint of unease in his eyes. Somewhere above, the chandelier trembled again, not from laughter this time, but from the quiet weight of what had just begun. Mara didn't look back. Her voice, when she finally spoke again, was barely a whisper, meant only for herself. "Let's see what dignity is really worth." Silence has a sound when it's full of fear. After the bet, it filled the ballroom like smoke, visible, heavy, impossible to breathe. The guests kept smiling, but their eyes darted away from Mara, as if glancing too long might cost them something invisible. Music returned, soft and polite, covering what no one wanted to face. Mara cleared tables with mechanical precision. Every glass sparkled. Every gesture was exact. She worked as if nothing had happened, though inside her mind replayed the scene. The laughter, the flash of Haldane's smile, the way people had clapped as if humiliation were entertainment. At the staff door, 2 waiters whispered. "She really said yes?" one asked. "Yeah," another said. In front of everyone. They looked around, lowered their voices. "She'll never work in this city again." Mara heard them. She didn't react. She had learned long ago that people speak freely when they believe you're invisible. The gala continued. Donors leaned closer to one another, laughing too loudly, pretending not to notice the tension beneath the crystal light. Haldane himself had already moved on, his charm restored, recounting a story about risk and courage as if the bet had been a harmless metaphor. But for Mara, the night had changed shape. Every sound felt sharper, the clink of silver, the fizz of champagne, the hum of money moving through the room. It was a theater of power, and she was now part of its script. When her shift ended, she stepped into the alley behind the hotel. The night air smelled of rain and exhaust. Her hands shook slightly as she unpinned her name tag. It felt heavy, though it weighed almost nothing. A fragment of memory surfaced. She was 12, sitting at the kitchen table in their small apartment in Newark. Her mother, a school teacher, was sewing a button back onto a faded blouse. The light was dim. The room smelled faintly of soap and onions. "People will try to tell you what you're worth," her mother said without looking up. "They'll name a price or laugh like it's funny. Don't believe them. You carry your own value. Quietly if you must, but carry it." Mara had nodded then, not understanding. Now the words landed differently. She looked at her reflection in a puddle by the curb, still in uniform, still standing upright. The puddle rippled when a car passed, and her face broke apart for a moment before coming back together. Inside the hotel, the staff cleaned up the remains of the evening. Glasses half full of champagne, napkins crumpled like forgotten promises. One of the servers held up a broken crystal flute. "Accident," he said with a shrug. But Mara noticed the reflection of the chandelier in the glass fragments. It looked like stars fallen to the ground. Beauty scattered, value redefined. As she gathered her things, she caught sight of the event's discarded program. On the back page, printed in gold letters, "Hosted by the Haldane Foundation for Leadership and Integrity." The irony made her throat tighten. She folded the program carefully and slipped it into her pocket. That night, at home in her small apartment, she sat by the window and opened her old laptop. The city outside flickered with lights and noise, but her room was quiet, filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of a wall clock. She typed Lawrence Haldane into the search bar. Articles appeared, magazine profiles, charity reports, photos of him shaking hands with politicians. The headlines praised his brilliance, his generosity, his visionary leadership. Mara scrolled through them all, expressionless. Then she found a smaller link near the bottom. A lawsuit settlement, a worker complaint, an investigation that never made the front page. The silence she'd felt in that ballroom now made sense. It wasn't just fear. It was habit. She clicked open the file. The light from the screen reflected faintly in her eyes. The next time she saw Haldane, she promised herself she wouldn't be silent. Money can make lies sound like truth. That was the first thing Mara realized as she studied the world of Lawrence Haldane. On the surface, every article, every interview, every glossy magazine photo told the same story. A man of vision, a man of charity, a man who gave back. But the deeper she read, the more the words began to contradict themselves. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness of her apartment. The light outlined her face, calm but alert. Stacks of dishes sat untouched in the sink. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge, like a steady pulse behind her thoughts. Mara read until the words blurred. Hedge funds, offshore accounts, philanthropic foundations named after schools that no longer existed. His empire stretched across continents, clean on paper, rotten underneath. The same hands that donated millions had taken billions. Workers dismissed, whistleblowers silenced, lawsuits quietly settled. To the public, Haldane was a savior in a tuxedo. To those beneath his shadow, he was something else entirely. A man who could buy silence and rename it respect. Mara leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. The glow of the screen painted the room pale blue, cold and sterile, like the light of an operating room. Her mother's voice returned, low and steady. Truth isn't loud, Mara. It just waits for people brave enough to say it out loud. She opened another tab. A news site, then another. She followed the trail through charity records, shell corporations, donation lists. One document linked to a company called Halcor Global, listed under humanitarian development. Its board members included senators, celebrities, even clergy. But buried in a footnote was a name that caught her attention. Haldane Holdings Limited, based in the Cayman Islands. She clicked the link. The page wouldn't load. Access restricted. Mara exhaled slowly. Of course. Later that week, she returned to the hotel for a catering shift. The same ballroom, the same polished marble floors, but the night carried a different weight now. She watched the staff set up for another charity event, hosted by the Haldane Foundation for Leadership and Integrity. The name stung like irony carved in gold. As she polished the wine glasses, she overheard two managers discussing guest arrivals. "He's flying in straight from Geneva," one said. "Supposedly just finalized a peace initiative." The other laughed softly. "Peace, profit. It's the same flight path for him." Mara didn't interrupt. But her silence now had purpose. Every detail she absorbed felt like a piece of the puzzle. After the event ended, she helped clear the ballroom. Glitter from confetti clung to her sleeves. She moved between tables, stacking plates, collecting napkins, scanning for something. Anything that could confirm what she already knew. Near Haldane's chair, she noticed something shining faintly under the tablecloth. She knelt down and found it, a silver cufflink, engraved with two letters, HH. It must have fallen from his sleeve during one of his exaggerated gestures, perhaps while he told the audience about ethical leadership. Mara held the cufflink up to the light. Its surface reflected both the chandelier above and her own face beneath it. Wealth and labor caught in the same small mirror. She closed her hand around it. The metal felt warm, almost alive, like it had absorbed the heat of the room's arrogance. She didn't know why she kept it. Maybe because it symbolized everything she had seen that night. How men like Haldane could drop symbols of power without even noticing, and how people like her were expected to pick them up and stay quiet. When she left the hotel, dawn was breaking. The city looked washed clean, but she knew better. In her pocket, the silver cufflink pressed against her palm. It was more than a trinket. It was proof that the man who claimed to own everything had already begun to lose something. Control of the story. And this time, the silence would belong to her. Some traps don't close with noise. They close with silence. 3 weeks after the gala, Lawrence Haldane's name filled headlines again. Visionary philanthropist hosts global leadership dinner. Cameras would broadcast the event live to donors and investors across the world. The same hotel ballroom, the same polished stage, but the night would not end the same way, because Mara Dorsey had returned. She came through the service entrance carrying trays stacked with crystal glasses. Her uniform was different now. A catering jacket, white gloves, her hair tucked neatly under a cap. The agency paperwork listed her as temporary hire. No one noticed her face. Haldane's staff moved like clockwork, rehearsed to perfection. Screens were being tested, lights adjusted. The stage carried the foundation's banner in gold letters: integrity, courage, leadership. The irony didn't sting her anymore. It steadied her. In her pocket, she still carried the silver cufflink she'd found, engraved HH. She had polished it until it gleamed, not for beauty, but for focus. Every time she touched it, she remembered what he'd said. Everything has a price, even pride. Tonight, she would prove him wrong. Mara's plan was not about revenge. It was about revelation. Over the past weeks, she had gathered quiet pieces. Quotes, recordings, documents, and stories from other staff who had endured the same casual cruelty. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Her message wasn't against one man, but against a culture that clapped when someone was mocked. Her words were simple, clear, and true. A speech she had written late at night, alone, after reading one of her mother's old letters. If you ever have a chance to speak truth where lies sound beautiful, don't whisper. The plan depended on timing. She had learned that the live stream used a single open microphone, connected to the event's master feed. If someone spoke before the official broadcast began, it would still be transmitted to the test channel, the one thousands of viewers used to check their connection early. She didn't need to crash the broadcast. She just needed to begin before it started. The ballroom filled quickly. Guests in tuxedos arrived, laughter echoing like rehearsed applause. Haldane stood near the stage, surrounded by investors. He looked untouched by the last event. confident, untouchable, radiant under the chandelier light. Mara watched him from behind the curtains. She was invisible again, but this time by choice. The crew gave the countdown. 5 minutes to live stream start. She slipped into the small control area behind the stage. No one noticed her. The rush of sound checks and camera cues hid everything. She found the microphone left for opening remarks. Its red light blinked once. Waiting, her pulse steadied. 3 minutes. She thought of every night she'd stayed silent. Every worker who'd been told to smile and move faster. Her throat felt dry, but her resolve was clean. 2 minutes. She closed her hand around the cufflink in her pocket. The metal was cool now. In the reflection of the soundboard, she saw both her face and Haldane's logo printed on the backdrop behind her. Power and truth side by side, 1 minute. She pressed the button. The mic clicked alive. For a breath, there was only static. Then her voice, calm, precise, unmistakably clear, filled the ballroom and the test feed beyond it. Good evening, she began. Before tonight's celebration begins, I'd like to speak about the word we print on our banners. Dignity. Heads turned. Technicians froze. Somewhere in the control room, someone shouted, "Who's on that mic?" But Mara didn't stop. She lifted her eyes toward the chandelier, that cold crown of light, and said softly, "There are people in this room who think dignity is a price tag. But dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you give or you lose." The director's voice cut through the headset. "Go live in 10 seconds. No one realized the microphone was already broadcasting. Mara took a quiet breath. Her voice steadied. "This isn't about one man," she said. "It's about all of us who stayed quiet when someone was turned into a joke." The final countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Mara looked out at the crowd. Unseen but utterly present. 7, 6. She pressed the cufflink to her palm. 5. The red light blinked. Steady on the mic. 4. Her next words were, "Ready? 3, 2, 1. The live stream began, and her voice entered the feed. Truth doesn't shout. It cuts. The ballroom froze as Mara's voice filled the air, calm and steady, carried through the speakers that were meant to praise men like Lawrence Haldane. Every word echoed off the glass and marble like a hammer against stone. "Good evening," she said. "Tonight we gather to celebrate leadership, courage, and dignity." Beautiful words, but sometimes words become mirrors, and they show us who we really are. The guests exchanged glances. Waiters stopped mid-step. The live stream cameras already rolling caught every angle. Crystal light, frozen faces, one voice. Haldane's smile faltered. At first, he thought it was part of the program, some artistic introduction. Then the words began to twist around him, slow and deliberate. "I once heard a man say that dignity has a price," Mara continued, "that it can be wagered, displayed, even bought." He made the statement in a room very much like this one, full of power, full of laughter. The sound of forks against plates stopped completely. The music that had played softly under the dinner ended mid-note. "Some people laughed," she said. "Some stayed silent. Silence, too, has a cost." Haldane's chair scraped faintly against the floor. His assistant whispered something, but he didn't respond. Cameras flashed like nervous lightning. Mara stood unseen behind the curtain near the stage, one hand steady on the microphone, the other wrapped around the silver cufflink in her pocket. The small piece of metal pressed into her palm like an anchor, proof of who he was and what she was doing. Her voice didn't tremble. "We call it confidence when the strong humiliate the weak. We call it entertainment when wealth mocks labor. But that isn't leadership. That's fear pretending to be strength." Someone at one of the front tables muttered, "Turn it off." But the tech crew hesitated. The sound engineer froze between obedience and conscience. The red light on the broadcast console stayed on. The stream kept running. The chat window online began to fill. Who is speaking? What's happening? This isn't scripted. Viewers who had tuned in early for a speech on innovation now heard something entirely different. A quiet, measured reckoning. In the ballroom, Mara's words sank deeper. "Maybe the question isn't how much dignity is worth," she said, "but how easily we give it away. When we laugh instead of listen. When we look down instead of around." Her tone never rose. It didn't need to. A woman in the third row looked down at her plate, eyes wet. A waiter near the door crossed his arms and lifted his head for the first time that night. Even the janitor paused in the hallway, broom in hand, listening through the crack of the door. Haldane finally stood. "Enough," he said under his breath. His voice carried anyway. "Who is responsible for this?" No one answered. He looked to the audience for support, but the crowd that once worshipped his certainty now sat in uneasy stillness. Every face reflected doubt back at him. Mara spoke again, softer now. "Some of us were told we should know our place. Maybe tonight we do. Maybe our place is here, reminding the powerful that dignity is not a gift they give. It's a right they can't take." The silence afterward was absolute. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop trembling. Then from the back of the room a slow sound began. One pair of hands clapping. It came from the janitor. Another joined him, a driver still in his uniform. Then a woman at a table near the front, a guest whose eyes no longer shone with admiration for Haldane. The applause spread unevenly, uncertain at first, then stronger. The billionaire stood frozen, his empire's smile cracked open for the cameras to see. Behind the curtain, Mara closed her eyes. The cufflink in her palm gleamed under the faint light, no longer a symbol of wealth but of witness. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Truth had already found the microphone. Applause fades faster than truth. By morning, the story had already escaped the ballroom. Someone had clipped the broadcast, posted it online, and titled it, "Anonymous Waitress Shames Billionaire Culture." The clip spread across social media in waves, millions of views, thousands of comments, opinions louder than facts. In the video, only Mara's voice could be heard. No face, no name, just calm words echoing through a golden room that looked smaller on screen than it had in person. For a moment, people celebrated her courage. Then came the spin. Haldane's PR team released a statement by noon. An unauthorized disruption occurred during last night's event. The incident misrepresents the values of the Haldane Foundation, which remains committed to dignity and progress. News anchors repeated his phrases like a chorus. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others called it class warfare. One headline read, "Mystery server hijacks charity feed, a cry for attention." Mara watched it all unfold from her small kitchen table, laptop open beside an untouched cup of coffee. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just listened. Her phone buzzed every few seconds. Calls from the agency, messages from co-workers warning her she'd been blacklisted from several hotels. "Sorry, Mara," one text read. "They said you're unprofessional. Unprofessional." The word stung more than the insults online. It meant she had broken an unspoken rule. Stay silent even when humiliated. Outside, the city hummed as usual. Cars honked, subways roared, screens glowed in every window. People debated her story between emails and errands. Some said she was brave. Others said she was ungrateful. But none of them knew her name. That anonymity felt both freeing and lonely. She had wanted to reveal a truth about power, not become its target. Yet here she was, erased by the same machine she had dared to question. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver cufflink. It still shone, but under morning light its reflection looked fractured, like a mirror about to crack. It had belonged to a man whose wealth could rewrite stories. But now it symbolized something else. How easily a polished surface could hide rot underneath. By afternoon, the media storm grew louder. A panel of experts debated her motives on television. One man laughed, saying, "If she really cared about dignity, she wouldn't have embarrassed anyone." Another replied, "Maybe embarrassment was the point." Mara turned the sound down. She had no desire to watch people turn pain into commentary. Then came an unexpected email. Subject, "Your story deserves to be heard in your own words." It was from a journalist named Elena Vega, known for investigative work on labor rights. The message was short, direct, and respectful. "You don't have to expose names. I just want the truth from your side. If you're ready to talk, I'll meet you anywhere, on or off camera." Mara read it twice. She didn't reply. Not yet. Days passed. The frenzy slowed but didn't disappear. Online, Haldane's defenders grew defensive. His critics grew bolder. Stockholders whispered. Charity partners asked questions. For the first time, the billionaire's empire showed hairline cracks in its surface. Mara noticed how people at the corner cafe began to look at her differently. A few smiled, as if recognizing her voice from the clip. Others avoided her altogether. The weight of being a symbol pressed harder than she expected. Still, when she saw headlines shift from "Who is she?" to "What is she saying?" she knew something was changing. That night, she sat at her desk again, the cufflink resting beside her laptop. Its metal gleamed like a question mark. She opened Elena Vega's email once more. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Outside her window, sirens wailed faintly, mixing with city wind. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Finally, Mara typed 6 words. "Yes, I'll tell it on record." She pressed send, then looked at the cufflink one last time. It reflected her face, not as a server, not as a symbol, but as a witness. Truth doesn't knock, it enters. The interview began under the sharp light of a television studio. Cameras hummed. The backdrop glowed in calm blue tones meant to suggest reason, not judgment. Across the desk sat Elena Vega, the journalist whose questions never wavered once they started cutting. In front of her, centered perfectly on the polished wood, rested a small object, a silver cufflink engraved HH. It caught the studio light like a mirror and threw it back at the camera. Mara watched from a quiet room across town. The sound came through slightly delayed, but the meaning arrived sharp. She didn't need to be seen anymore. Her voice, her act, had already started the fire. The segment opened with footage of Haldane smiling at charity events, shaking hands with politicians, standing beside children holding banners that read, "Integrity through industry." Then the video cut to Elena's face. "Mr. Haldane," she began in her calm, measured tone, "our investigation found multiple internal documents from your foundation and its subsidiaries. They show consistent underpayment of staff, falsified charity expenses, and intimidation of whistleblowers. Would you like to respond?" The screen split. Elena on one side, Haldane on the other, appearing through satellite feed from his penthouse office. Behind him, city lights flickered like distant applause. He smiled, the kind of smile designed to survive any question. "Ms. Vega, I run a global organization. If someone somewhere mishandled funds, we correct it. But to call it exploitation, well, that's quite a story." "It's not a story," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "It's documentation." Pages flashed on screen, signatures, memos, payout lists, all with the same initials, LH. Viewers saw the neat handwriting that had approved each cost reduction. One memo even referred to the dismissed staff as replaceable labor units. Haldane leaned forward on his camera feed. "Anyone can forge papers," he said, his tone tightening. "You can't run an empire without enemies." Elena didn't look away. "And yet these documents came from your own servers." A pause followed, long enough for the sound engineer to check if the feed had frozen. Then she added, "Would you like to comment on the night you told a waitress that dignity has a price?" Haldane blinked once, twice. His lips curved upward again, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "A joke taken out of context," he said. "People are too sensitive these days." But sensitivity, it turned out, was contagious. Within minutes of the broadcast, phones at Haldane Holdings began ringing non-stop. Investors demanded statements. Partners paused donations. Social media filled with screenshots of contracts and pay stubs, leaked by former employees who had watched the interview live. Elena's producer whispered updates into her earpiece as the feed continued. "Stocks down 12%. 2 sponsors just pulled out." Haldane's voice on the screen grew harder, more brittle. "You can't destroy me with gossip," he said. "No," Elena replied quietly, "but the truth might." In her small apartment, Mara sat perfectly still. The light from the television glowed across her face like dawn breaking through a long night. On the screen, the camera cut back to the studio. Elena's hand rested beside the cufflink. "This was found after one of your events," she said. "A symbol of the image you built, polished, valuable, engraved with your initials. Tell me, Mr. Haldane, does it still belong to you?" The camera zoomed slightly. The cufflink shone bright under the studio light. Haldane hesitated. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Keep it," he said. By the next morning, the news spread worldwide. Lawrence Haldane resigns amid scandal. Reporters gathered outside his offices. Photographers crowded his car as he left without a word. The empire of applause had finally fallen quiet. Inside the studio, the silver cufflink remained on the desk. Camera flashes reflected off its surface like small explosions, each one a fragment of a lie breaking apart. In her apartment, Mara watched the final shot. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "It's done." And for the first time, the silence felt clean. Some victories make no noise at all. Weeks had passed since Lawrence Haldane's fall. His resignation filled the news for days, then faded beneath newer scandals and headlines. But the silence that followed was different now. Cleaner, freer, almost gentle. Mara had moved back to her old rhythm: study, work, rest. Yet everything around her felt changed, as if the city itself had learned to breathe again. One morning, she found a small envelope slipped under her apartment door. No return address, no printed logo, just her name written in a careful hand. Inside was a single page folded once. "You don't know me, but I worked for Haldane for 12 years. I watched good people lose everything for telling the truth. You reminded me that silence is a choice. Thank you for breaking it. Former employee, Halcor Global." The handwriting trembled slightly, but the words stood firm. Mara sat at her kitchen table, the letter resting between her hands. The morning light slanted through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the paper. She read it twice, then folded it back carefully, as if closing a wound that had finally begun to heal. Her small apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock and the faint sound of traffic below. On the counter sat the silver cufflink, still polished, still engraved HH. She had thought about throwing it away, but she never did. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder. Proof that power could crumble and truth could stand. She placed the cufflink next to the letter. Together they told a story, one of arrogance undone and of a voice that had refused to stay invisible. A week later, Mara attended her first meeting at the Fair Work Foundation, a group that fought for workers' rights. The office was small and cluttered, filled with donated chairs and second-hand computers, but it felt alive. On the wall hung a handwritten slogan, "Dignity isn't charity. It's justice." The word stayed with her. When she spoke, her voice was calm but certain. She didn't mention Haldane by name, or the bet, or the ballroom. She talked about silence, how it spreads when fear goes unchallenged, how it breaks the moment someone dares to speak. People listened. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't carrying the weight alone. That evening, she returned home and opened the window. The city stretched below, washed in the pale gold of early dawn. She placed the cufflink on the windowsill. The metal caught the light and glimmered, soft, steady, unpretentious. It no longer belonged to the man who tried to buy dignity. It belonged to the moment it couldn't be sold. Mara watched the light grow stronger. The world outside kept moving, loud, flawed, restless, but within her a deep stillness settled. The cufflink gleamed once more, not as a symbol of wealth, but as witness. Power fades fastest when it tries to outshine truth. Months after the broadcast, Lawrence Haldane disappeared from public view. No farewell statement, no new ventures. His empire fractured quietly. Investors withdrew, charities dissolved, and his name vanished from event programs that once depended on it. The same headlines that once praised him now spoke of ethical failure and systemic rot. But the world did not stop spinning. It rarely does. In universities and leadership seminars, a short audio clip began to circulate, the recording of a calm female voice saying, "Dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you give or you lose." Professors used it to discuss moral courage. Students quoted it in essays about power and ethics. No one knew the waitress's full story, only that her words had forced a billionaire to face himself. Mara never corrected them. She continued her work with the Fair Work Foundation, quiet and steady, helping others find their voices. Fame never interested her. Change did. When people asked how she had stayed calm that night, she would only answer, "It wasn't courage. It was clarity." One evening, after a long meeting, she passed a shop window and caught her reflection in the glass. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself, older, more certain. Her posture no longer shaped by fear or service. The mirror held two worlds at once, the woman she had been, balancing trays under a chandelier, and the woman who had spoken into a microphone with nothing but truth for armor. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply met her own eyes and kept walking. In her bag was the same silver cufflink, smooth from being held so often. Its engraving had begun to fade, the initials almost erased by time and touch, but the meaning had only grown stronger. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the pavement, painting thin halos across the wet ground. The city was loud, alive, indifferent, and yet somehow gentler than before. As Mara walked beneath it, the cufflink caught the faintest glint of light. It wasn't gold or victory that shone there, but something quieter, deeper and earned. She had won no bet, only her name back, and that was worth everything.